like to use the image of the plumber. So let's say, for example, the family comes to a faucet problem. We will look at the entire plumbing structure in the house, and we say to ourselves, "Oh, maybe it's going badly. So this is the child having a problem, but basically it's the pipe on the single floor that is blocked." So there may be something that the child expresses, but he expresses it for all the functioning of the family.
I've heard that your waiting list is not that long. Is that true?
Yeah, it's true. It would depend on the sector and the number of employees, but usually we're able to provide the services within 3 to 4 months.
The medication, it's not gonna heal you. You will have to help yourself. Like you have to go see a psychologist or things like that to be better. I think that's really what I've learned and still doing today.
Hello and welcome to this podcast. This is a co-production between Aidersonenfant.com and la Fondation Jeunes en Tête. Today we're talking about a deep, serious subject that we need to address: depression and teenagers. We will get into it right after this.
Mental health challenges. For over 20 years now, la Fondation Jeunes en Tête has offered mental health awareness workshops all over Quebec's high schools. La Fondation now offers mental health kits for families, youth, and school staff. Free, simple, and lively scientifically validated content to reduce psychological distress. To find out more, go to fondatiojeunesentete.org.
I have the pleasure of interviewing Paméla-Andrée Nérette, psychotherapist and adjointe clinique at the CIUSSS Centre-Sud de Montréal. Paméla-Andrée, thank you so much for being here and speaking with me about this subject.
My pleasure.
Paméla, can you tell me, how would you define depression?
Well, depression is a mental disorder that manifests itself through different symptoms. The general trait is depressed mood, as we know, deep sadness, and also loss of interest in all or nearly all activities of teenagers. So, but we have other symptoms that might be great irritability, tantrums, especially for younger ones, weight loss or gain weight, increased appetite, insomnia or hypersomnia, restlessness or loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness or excessive guilt, decreased capacity of thinking and thoughts of death, what we call suicidal ideation, or it might even go as far as a suicide attempt. There is a very important comorbidity between depression and anxiety, but yes, depression can present itself by itself, but usually we have, anxiety that is on board as well.
How long do we need to see these factors in our teen's life before we should be alerted?
To have this diagnosis, we need these symptoms must have been present for at least 2 weeks, and they must have an impact on the functioning of the teenagers. Well, usually teenagers, they've been in difficult situation for more than 2 weeks.
They wouldn't have addressed their inner state before, meaning they've been suffering for some time. Is that what you're telling me?
Exactly.
The image that I get is this image of a teenager who just doesn't want to go to school, doesn't want to get out of bed, doesn't want to do things. Do I have the right image?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly. Sometimes if he does it, he's going to do it, but with so much distress, with so much effort, that this is where we are talking about the functioning is really, it's so difficult.
And what would you say would be the main difference between the adolescence crisis and depression?
A good question. I have to say first that most teenagers are fine. What is typical in adolescence is the need to get away from parents, be with friends, identity exploration, self-discovery, outside the family cocon. So adolescence is generally a very flourishing period full of ideas, full of creativity, but it's also an intense developmental stage, which allows the discovery of one's identity, personality, strengths, limits. And in all of this, yes, there's a reactivity. There might be a reactivity to parents. So there can be, great irritability, tougher communication with parents, an attempt sometimes to claim more autonomy and power. But, it's not because, you're teenagers that you will have this crisis. And there's no connection necessarily with adolescence and being depressed and in distress. No way,
And what would you say is the difference between being depressed and having a depression? Is it like the length or the gravity of the symptoms, or?
The difference mainly is between the severity is based on the number of criteria. The severity of the symptoms, as you said, and the degree of impairment in the functioning of the teen. We see, athletic kids who no longer want to go practice the sport. So there's an inability to be in action and an alteration that is very, very clear in the functioning of the young person.
If your teenager has a depression, do you think it will follow him all of his life?
No. The way I work is I'm trying to see it as an occasion also for the teenagers and also for the family to change, decrease, for example, some of the risk factors, change, the things in that environment that, lead the teenager through depression.
Okay, so it's an opportunity to gain some tools for later adversities. It's maybe also an opportunity to get to know oneself maybe a little bit better.
Exactly.
All right. I get that.
Yes.
And what would you say is the major difference between a depression for an adult and a depression for a teenager? Because, it seems like more important when it's an adult who has it.
It's not more important when it's the adult who is having a depression, but since the adult has more responsibility, the impact may seem worse because he has a job, he has a family. So I would say the suffering is similar, it's the same, but the level of suffering is, it's comparable, but the symptoms, even though they're the same, they might have more impact if the adult has a depression compared to the teenagers, because the teenager who no longer wants to go to these activities will perhaps be less alerted than a father or mother who is no longer going to work because there's a loss of finance, for example.
Yeah, so it has more impact.
Yes, exactly. It may be more impressive, but the suffering is the same.
Paméla-Andrée, thank you so much for your expertise. In the next segment, we will be talking about treatment and how to find help. Keep watching.